The soul of a Jew gets cut off if a Jew does not get circumcision, and also a Jew should get circumcised even after he dies. It's interesting that the meal of circumcision is a mitzvah, and whoever does not eat at the meal of circumcision, as if he becomes excommunicated to the heavens. And therefore, it's the practice not to invite people to circumcision, because if they would not come for whatever reason, they should not become excommunicated to the heavens. Interestingly, since the Torah says to circumcise on the 8th day, if the 8th day comes out on Shabbos, circumcision pushes off prohibitions of Shabbos, and the child is circumcised on Shabbos unless it's dangerous, it's life-threatening for the child to have circumcision then on the 8th day. What about the case that the woman is about to become a Jew? She gave birth to a child, and she's about to go to mikveh to become a Jew. And the child would be a ger kotan. But nevertheless, since the child was born as a non-Jew, even though his 8th day comes out on Shabbos, he would not get circumcision on Shabbos, because at this point right now, he is still not Jewish. Interestingly, if a child is born by a C-section, also Shabbos is not desecrated to do for him circumcision on his 8th day. We understand that the prohibitions of Shabbos are pushed away to do circumcision on the 8th day. But what happens after circumcision? Are we allowed to move the knife of circumcision after the circumcision was done? Ramos says yes. This is what Beis Yosef says in the name of Rabbeinu Yerucham, that one is allowed to carry the knife from the house into a courtyard which has an eruv to hide and protect the circumcision knife, even though it would no longer be used on Shabbos. However, Maril said that Mari Segel said to drop out of the hand anything that was used for circumcision, because now after circumcision they are considered to be muktzah, and therefore the knife should be dropped out of the hand, according to Maril, according to Mari Segel, because it's considered to be a muktzah. However, Rashal permitted to move the knife, just like Ramo permitted to hide it in the courtyard, because since at the beginning of Shabbos it was not muktzah, it cannot become muktzah in the second half of Shabbos. Taz says that he is not in the position to decide between the great Torah giants, Maril and Rashal. However, it appears to Taz that it's forbidden to carry the knife after circumcision into the courtyard, even though there is an eruv between the courtyard and the house. And Taz learns it from the case of a kli shemelach le'iser, a vessel which is used for prohibited purposes. For example, on Yom Tov, a person wants to use a crusher, on which he usually crushes things, which is considered to be a vessel which is used for prohibited activities, because a person would not be able to do that on Yom Tov. But nevertheless, he wants to use that board to cut meat. So Beis Hillel says, yes, he'd be allowed to cut meat on it for Yom Tov. However, after he cut the meat, he would not be able to move that board. Says the Taz, the same thing here about the circumcision knife. After circumcision is done, he wouldn't be able to move it. Says the Taz, also a skewer on which a person roasts meat. After he roasted the meat, he would not be able to move the skewer, because the skewer became repulsive. It's now full of blood and became a muktzah machmas mius. Says the Taz, the same about a knife which was used for circumcision. He should not be able to move it after circumcision is done. Taz also says, this that the Rashal said, that something which was not a muktzah at the beginning of Shabbos cannot become muktzah on Shabbos. That's discussing a case where an object could have been used at the beginning of Shabbos. In the middle of Shabbos, it was no longer fit to be used. Later on, once again, it became fit to be used. And therefore, since it was fit to be used at the beginning, it's not a muktzah at the end, even though in the middle of Shabbos, it could not be used. However, says the Taz, the case of circumcision knife is different, because at the beginning of Shabbos, it was not designated to be used. You can't use circumcision knife to cut things, to cut vegetables. It wasn't designated to be used at the beginning of Shabbos. It was designated to be used only during circumcision. Therefore, since it was not designated to be used at the beginning of Shabbos, it cannot be used after circumcision is finished. And this says the Taz, that the Beis Yosef says in the name of Rabbeinu Yerucham, in the name of Ramban, that the person who is holding on to a circumcision knife after circumcision is able to move it to a safe place. That says that is only because he is still holding it. He is moving it in a permissible way because it's still in his hand. However, says the Taz, if he would have to drop the knife out of his hand, let's say to do priya, to remove the membrane under the skin of circumcision, he would not be able to pick up that knife to hide it. If he would have to drop the knife out of his hand, and the knife could possibly get lost, says the Taz, that Rabbeinu Yerucham in the name of Ramban, would not allow him to do circumcision on Shabbos, knowing that he would have to pick up the knife, but instead would tell him that he should not do circumcision on Shabbos. Therefore, says the Taz, Ramban would allow him to hide the knife only in that room, in a permissible way, but not to carry it out of the room into the courtyard, not to carry it more than necessary. Interestingly, Rashal said that he saw people who would not move a shofar after they would blow it on Rosh Hashanah. Rashal doesn't understand, since you can blow the shofar again on Rosh Hashanah, until the end of Rosh Hashanah you're allowed to blow the shofar, why would they not move the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? But according to what the Taz said, that just like a skewer, which was used to roast meat, and just like a grinder on which meat was cut on Yom Tov, was able to be used for the needs of Yom Tov. However, once the need of Yom Tov is finished, one is not able to move the skewer, one is not able to move the cutting board. Yes, they could be used again the second time on Yom Tov for the needs of Yom Tov, but not for the needs of Yom Tov. They could not be moved. And therefore, explains the Taz, the shofar also should not be moved. If a person finished blowing it and is not using it for the sake of Rosh Hashanah, he's not blowing again. So just like the skewer should not be moved, the same way the shofar should not be moved. And the same way the circumcision knife, says the Taz, should not be moved unless it's for the needs of protecting the knife, of hiding it. Says the Taz, you can hide it in that room, not like Ramo, who allows to move it into the courtyard, even though there is a Eruv, says the Taz, but it's unnecessary to move it out into the courtyard. You could hide it in the house. Nikudas HaKesef, however, argues on the proofs that the Taz gave, says Nikudas HaKesef, they're completely different. The grinding board is different. It's a kli shemalachto leiser. It's a vessel that's used for prohibited purposes. It's a muktzah at the beginning of Shabbos, or at the beginning of Yom Tov. Yes, you're allowed to cut meat on it for the sake of Yom Tov. But once you finish what you need to do for Yom Tov, you're not allowed to move that grinding board, because it's a muktzah at the beginning of Shabbos, and it continues to being a muktzah. And the same thing as skewer. A skewer becomes a muktzah because it's full of blood. It's repulsive. But that's not true for circumcision knife. Circumcision knife is not a kli shemalachto leiser. It's not a vessel which in itself is a muktzah, and it doesn't become repulsive after circumcision. However, Nikudas HaKesef agrees that Ramo would allow to move that circumcision knife only if it's necessary, and would not allow to carry it for no reason.